The Old Rider by J.S. Stroud, page 1. No one paid much attention to the rider on the stallion. He was a nobody, just another drifter, and if they looked at him at all, the only thing they would have noticed was that he was not wearing spurs. This was cattle country where men lived by the gun, the rope, and the spur. It was strange to see a man without a pair of the star-shaped tools attached to his boots, and even the faded black hat had turned brown with age brought him no attention. There was a dark brown sweat stain along the wide brim of the hat that shaded the rider's eyes from the heat of the midday sun. From his head to his toes he spoke of being a worn-out, tired old drifter. He didn't wear the bright-colored bandana like the younger cowboys. In fact, there was nothing around his neck, and even the brace of twin colts looked old and used. Few looked up into the weather-beaten face of the man, but all eyes were on the stallion beneath him. This was an animal they had only seen in their dreams. Its eyes were like black coals of fire. The air from its nostrils seemed to form a haze that brought those eyes to life, and every step it took spoke of power and strength. This animal had never run with the wild herds it had led them. The scars on its chest and legs spoke of the battles it had been in to earn him the right to lead. Men and children alike stood stone still on the wooden sidewalk to watch them go by. Many of them had never seen an animal like this, and few ever thought they would see one again. Tamer horses tied to the hitching rail shied away from the savage beast as they approached. The tracks in the soft dirt of the street showed that this was one horse that had never been shod. It carried no brand and was mastered by none. It was as savage at heart as it was in spirit. The Indians called it the Black Ghost, or Midnight Phantom. It had been in their villages many times, and always at night, always to steal. The black stallion with the white chest and mane was well known in the villages. It came in like a ghost, and the white mane and chest would flash in the night air as it attacked the stallions trying to guard their own herds. One or a dozen, it made no difference. The battles were always the same. Young, strong horses went down under its hooves, busted and bruised. It earned the name Sudden Death from these raids. Young warriors who had grown up on the stories told about the daring raids of the magnificent horse. It had become a legend in its own time, both feared and loved. Every child in the village dreamed of being the one to catch, ride, and win the greatest horse alive, and this was it. No one ever noticed the rider as he walked by. This was the way of his life. There was a slight thumping sound beneath his books as he walked to the Crooked Horn restaurant and bar. The rider had never been there before, but it looked like 100 other saloons with 2 painted windows in front and bat-wing doors. It would be dark inside, and most of the cowboys would step through those doors and stop, letting their eyes adjust to the cave-like setting, but not him. He leaned against the wall between the doors and window, briefly closing his eyes to let them adjust to the darkness before stepping through the swinging doors. The room was long and narrow, 30 feet wide and 60 feet long, and more than a dozen tables were scattered about in a sloppy manner. A blond-haired, blue-eyed, gorilla-looking fellow with a scar running down his face stood polishing a shot glass behind the bar. "Don't freeze up, cowboy. We don't bite." The voice came from one of the waitresses standing at the pot-belly stove sipping coffee. He walked to the nearest table and sat down. The young waitress spoke again. "He's all yours, Mom." The older waitress looked annoyed and came back with, "I told you not to call me that. Why is that every cowboy in the country calls me Mom?" "Well, Marilyn," Sheila answered, "it could be because you've been 29 longer than most of us can count." Marilyn picked up the tally book off the corner of the bar and headed for the table. "What'll it be, Ace?" A grin of mischief was on her face. "What's edible and what's good?" the man asked as a second thought after catching a whiff of the aroma coming from the kitchen. "It depends on the cook, whether she's reading, sleeping, or eating. If you want to order the biscuits, they're going to be burned. If you order the beans, they're going to be burned. If you order the gravy, it's going to be lumpy and burned." Marilyn laughed, trying to get a smile out of the man. "The cook will have one of her children kill a chicken if you like." The younger waitress spoke up again. "Yeah, and you better grab the chicken when it hits the table, 'cause it's tough enough to fly off 10 minutes after it's cooked." Marilyn gave the younger waitress a look of disdain. "Shut up, Sheila. You couldn't boil water in a volcano, and you know it." Turning back to the man, Marilyn asked again, "What'll it be, Ace?" "I guess it's biscuits and beans," he said. Marilyn smiled at the man she called Ace and said, "It's your funeral," and with that she turned and walked away. Joe leaned back in his chair and watched her leave. Maybe this town was not so bad after all. Page 98. Bobby and Michelle took the buggy and wagon road back into town. It was a longer ride, but Michelle didn't mind. She just snuggled up closer to her future husband. Bobby didn't mind because it was smoother and there was less chance of bouncing around their cargo, even if it was longer. The town was deserted as they drove up. Even Paul's makeshift bar was closed. Several dogs began following the wagon and howling at the top of their lungs. Michelle tried to shoo them away, but they became more aggressive, and some even tried to jump into the back of the wagon. "What is wrong with these crazy dogs?" she screamed as they ran alongside. Bobby took out his pistol and fired a round into the ground in front of the dogs. The dogs took off running at the sound of the revolver and the smack of the bullet landing beside their paws. Michelle watched as the dogs ran, some forward and others back. The street lamps lit the back of the wagon. The tarp had moved during the night, and the toe of one boot showed from beneath the tarp. "I thought we dropped Rick off," she said as she pulled back the tarp to check the man. Ray lay face up, his dead eyes staring up into the heavens, and it only took a second for Michelle to realize that this was not Rick, and a dead man lay in the back of the wagon. Michelle turned on him with flailing fists, swinging at his face and arms. "How could you?" she screamed as she swung at the man. "Stop it!" Bobby yelled. Between the dogs, the gunfire, and Michelle's screams, the horses were acting up, and he was having a hard time controlling them. As Bobby yelled, they bolted, tearing through town at breakneck speeds. "You're going to get us killed," he cried as he fought for control of the runaway team. Bobby had fought runaway teams before, but never in the middle of the night, and never with a hysterical woman trying to claw his eyes out. He was pleading with her to stop, and he knew he couldn't push her away because she might fall out of the wagon and get run over. He was doing the best to bring the team under control, and his soon-to-be bride at the same time. He spoke again, this time in a lower voice. "Stop it, honey, before you kill us both." This time Michelle listened and stopped the beating. She even pulled herself against Bobby and held on as he fought the frightened horses. "Stop them," she begged as the wagon rocked from side to side. He sicked the brake with his foot as he pulled with all of his strength against the reins. Bobby felt the horses turn to the right, so he jerked the reins to the left. The wagon was up on two wheels as the horses turned, then rocked and came up on the opposite two wheels. "Hang on," Bobby cried as the wagon launched forward and they were bounced around on the wagon seat as it hit the ruts in the road. "We're going to crash," Michelle cried as Bobby fought the team. Light was coming on as they charged through town. Ray bounced out of the back of the wagon and onto the street. The dogs were no longer interested in Ray. They were doing their best to get out of the way of the runaway wagon. The lead horse stumbled and fell, dragging the animal next to him down into the dirt. They skidded in the dirt as the wagon tongue slid beside them. The wagon came to a stop with chains and bracers locked tight, still on its wheels. Bobby hopped down and ran to the horses. They were trying to stand as he approached. Michelle was climbing down from the wagon. "Quick," Bobby said, "go get the doc." "You mean the vet?" Michelle asked. "They're the same thing," Bobby said. "Just go get one of them." Michelle ran towards the stables. The horses were standing as Paul came running up. "What can I do to help?" he asked as Bobby ran his hands over the animals, checking for broken bones. "Will you go get the undertaker?" Bobby asked. "Why?" Paul wanted to know. "The horses weren't dead. Did you run somebody over?" "No," Bobby answered. "He was shot." "Who did you kill?" Paul demanded, trying to understand how he could shoot someone while still fighting a terrified pair of horses. "I didn't kill anyone," Jim said. I didn't kill anyone, Jim did." "Jim could not have killed anyone," Paul answered. "He is out at the Malloy Ranch." "I know he's out at the ranch. That's where he killed Ray." "Who is Ray?" Paul wanted to know. "Ray is the guy Jim killed," Bobby replied. "Well then, why do you need an undertaker?" Paul insisted. "Because Ray is laying out in the street," Bobby said. "If Jim killed him at the ranch, how come he's laying in the street?" Paul was curious. "Look," Bobby said, "Jim shot him at the ranch, and I brought him into town in the wagon, and he got pitched out when the horses bolted, and he's laying out there now. So could you go get the undertaker and pick him up before someone else steps on him?" No one ever said Paul was the sharpest person on the planet, Bobby thought, but he might as well have been talking to a tree stump. But in the end, he finally understood. "Sure," he said. "Why didn't you just say so in the first place?" Paul took off running as Bobby continued to check on the horses.